My name is Joe Kuhn. I was very fortunate. I went to a private school in Wilmington, Delaware called Wilmington Friends. It was run by the Quakers, and they believed in absolute equality. So they had girls basketball, they had boys basketball, and so forth and so on. And starting in the 7th grade, I went to that school, small. The graduating class was 12 people. But the girls got on the bus, the boys got on the bus, and we all went to where we were going to play. And I had absolutely no discrimination. People my age were not playing at all. People who are now my age were never playing at that time. And then I did the same thing. I went to a small liberal arts college called Ursinus, and they were run by the Lutherans. Same thing, equality. And so I had opportunities. The major universities were not playing sports, but the small colleges were on the East Coast. And so I was able to develop the skills that come with sports, you know, whether it's patience or practice or self-esteem, or you could go on and on and on. They're the same for boys and girls and men and women. And so I had no discrimination, and I had a wonderful background. And I decided one day we would divide up into 5 groups, and each of the groups would discuss an issue, and then they would present that issue, select somebody in their group, and that person would present to the group the total. So fine. Count off by 5s, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They all went into their little corners. And as I looked, I saw there were 5 male students. And there was one, just coincidence, by counting off in each of the groups. So I thought, well, that's fine. So they talked for 15 minutes, and then I said, group 1, and up pop, I'll make up a name, Tom, to present. Group 2, up pop Harry. Group 3, mind you, there are only 5 men in the whole class. Group 3, where am I going with this? Steve popped up. Group 4, oh, it's, you know, Barry. Group 5, well, give me a break here. Is it going to be a woman? No. From their culture, from their lives, the women who were quite qualified. Now, first of all, I want to say 2 of those men I would have picked. Those men, they were excellent students. They were articulate. They were bright. They understood the issue. I would have picked them. The other 3, I have a stuffed dog, Spunky is her name, and she could have done just as well. They were poor students, they didn't come to class, they mumbled, and yet these women, all of whom in those groups were more qualified, sat there. And none of them popped up and said, I'll do this, you know, I understand this. And I thought to myself, had I been sitting in that group, what would have happened? I would have said, look, I know this issue, I can present this, I'll do it for my group. And so I'm driving home, and I said, why am I like that? And they're like they are, you know. And I thought, sports. The next morning, I got up, started reading about Title IX. I had paid it almost 0 attention. Who am I going to write? Told me who to write to support it. They said they needed somebody to go over here and speak to the football coaches, who were, of course, having a hissy fit because they might have to give $1 to the women, go talk to them. And I became involved in really trying to use sports for women to move forward for their well-being and so forth. And I became involved in, you know, various aspects of it. Well, it was interesting. And as you say, I was talking to people. In some of the schools, it was just like they immediately started to look at what they were doing and say, this is not fair. We cannot have one little pitiful set of uniforms for the women and 3 for the men, and so forth and so on. On the other hand, there were schools who were completely ignoring it, you know, to all intents and purposes. And of course, in those schools, ultimately, there were lawsuits, which you hate to think that that's what you had to do. When I became the athletic director, I said quote, we cannot compete without scholarships. Well, there was no money. So therefore, I started, I guess it would be one of the things I would remember as a good thing, the Pioneer Club. The Pioneer Club were members of the community who raised money for us. And the first thing I did, there was a little restaurant on Oak Street or somewhere, and I looked who were the movers and shakers in the towns, or their husbands were, it doesn't matter. And I gathered me about 10 women, the wives of the presidents of the banks, the wives of the corporate presidents, the wives of who was in charge of Medical City and Presby and so forth. I got 10 people, and I said, good afternoon, ladies. They didn't know why they were coming. I said, I want to raise money for scholarships. We cannot compete. We want to have scholarships. I promise you they will only go to good students. Will you help raise the money? And right away, 2 people were appointed the chair. Each of these people went out. We ended up with maybe 10 or 15 teams, 5 people on a team. And I started working on, you 5 call on these people, you call on these people, you call on that people. And the second thing I did was the athletes stayed for spring break, some of them. I said, we have however many thousand graduates we have. I have not a number in my mind. I said, we're going to write every one of them and ask them to start contributing to the Pioneer Club. And so between the Pioneer Club efforts of the students and the efforts of the community, we raised about $50,000 the first year, which was enough to start. Now, could it give full scholarships? No. And, basketball got 1 or 2, and volleyball got 1, and so forth. The only conference in the area was a Lone Star, and right away in big print on their bylaws, you must have football. Well, that's not good. But I did know one member of their athletic department, one director of athletics, and I called him and I said, look, I think we can be a good addition to your conference, and I want to apply. He said, well, what does your president think? It was Shirley Chater at the moment. She was outstanding. She went on to be head of Social Security in the government. But anyway, so I put together a packet, and off we went, Dr. Chater and Dr. Euler, who was the dean of the college and in charge of athletics, and off we went. And here we're sitting, of course, all the little men athletic directors, not a woman to be seen. And I said, 1, let's start with students. We have good students. I said, secondly, we have winning teams. We had good teams at the time. We're successful. Thirdly, we're in the metro media area. We'll give publicity to the Lone Star Conference, which is part of the whole situation. So I said, we can be an advocate for you. And blah, 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 blah. And they said, well, we'll let you know this afternoon. Well, of course, I'm having a heart attack, as is President Chater. We're all just, and the phone call came and said that they had accepted us. Well, people really don't know I did this particularly, but to me it is the best thing that I did in my career. The NC2A at the time, and it was in the mid-'80s somewhere because I was athletic director from '82 to '92, but I don't remember the date. They did not permit you to bring to your campus athletes for tryouts. You had to go where they were, and you could watch them, you could talk to their parents, and they had signing dates and particular times that you could do this, but you could not bring them to your campus. Well, for the big Division I schools, that was perfectly fine. They had tremendous recruitment budgets, and so they would send out their little worker bees out of the administration building, and they would go wherever they wanted to go, and they would hear about men athletes because these little papers in small towns would be writing up the men's, boys, we would say, high school events. And over here, back with the cartoons, there might be a little something in the girls. So there was no real exposure. So the recruiters didn't go there anyway. So I said, look, Division II cannot afford to go to these schools. And you are keeping young women and men who are not perhaps at the very, very highest level, or they're in some small town that you don't know where they are. You're keeping them from going to school and having an opportunity to get a scholarship. So I went and got the president, and we submitted a proposal to the NC2A to allow tryouts on your campus if you're a Division II school for your scholarships. So now you have to go to the convention and talk people into it. Now, at that time, I believe now, I'm not sure, that the various Division 1, 2, and 3 may meet separately, but at that time they all met together. So we would meet in huge convention centers, and this particular one was in Nashville. And so we were all meeting there, I would say maybe 1,500, maybe 2,000 people. So I get up there with my little proposal, you know, which they approved, they put on the agenda. And everybody, all my friends said, you know, you're wasting your time. Well, you know, no harm, no foul was my basic idea. So I get up there and I start talking about all of what I'm telling you. You know, the Division I schools, you're penalizing young athletes who are not maybe up to what you're looking for, or you don't know about them. And we want to bring them onto our campuses so that at Division II they have a chance. The Division I schools didn't like this because, heaven forbid, you might find an athlete out there that they missed that they won, you know. So they don't want you to do this, or some of them. So he gets up and he says, well, you know, what are we going to do about insurance and injuries? And you bring these kids on campus and something will happen. And I said very quietly, or not quietly because you had to be heard, but I said, well, I believe the University of Michigan has the largest number of summer camps for children in the United States, which I knew it did. Elementary kids, junior high, senior high, and when they come to your campus, from which you make millions of dollars, what do you do along the issues of injury and so forth? And I thought, I've got you now in my mind. I thought, I've got you now. And he sat down, you know. So anyway, they voted. And by some miracle, and Division I schools would have to vote also, because it was not just Division II schools. The whole convention center of 1, 2, and 3 had to vote for this. And so they passed it. Well, then somebody who voted for it moved to reconsider, which they can do. It has to be a person who voted for the bill. You can't have somebody who voted against it try again. So somebody stood up who had voted to pass this and said, well, changed their mind, they saw these issues, and so it had to go up for a vote again, what they call reconsideration, and it passed again. And I just wrote Sandy last week because I thought, my God, that's 40, 50 years. Are they still doing that? And she said yes. And so although I did things for TWU, whether it be the Pioneer Club or whether it be the Lone Star Conference or whatever, getting the whole country to permit Division II schools to have tryouts was probably the most important thing I did. But a fun thing that I did was there was a group called National Association Collegiate Women Athletic Administrators, NACWA. And I got on their board. So we had a meeting in Chicago or somewhere. And by this time we were all talking about Title IX, and this school was doing fine, but this school was just awful. And these were, you know, women athletic directors from all over the country. So we came up with a card. And on the card, on the front, it said, how can it be? And on the inside, we would write, and we would send this to the president of some university. How can it be that your senior women athletic administrator title is a man? How can it be? And then we would hear that in some school, how can it be your women athletes are driving their cars to the competition and the men athletes are in a school bus? How can it be? We never know what happened, if any of the people paid any attention at all. But as we met, and people came up with these horror stories from all over the country, we whipped out our How Can It Be card and sent it to the president of those universities and to the athletic director and to whoever. And that was a sort of a fun thing. And then I was on other committees I was on the softball committee for something or other, I forget what it was, but I made myself available to be on committees. I enjoyed that interaction, and I felt I could help. And so branching out into the national level, although I enjoyed my work at TWU and things I could do for TWU, it was fun to see other things happen because of my efforts, we'll say, and other people's, obviously. My advice would be pay it forward. What can you do? You had this opportunity. What can you do when you go out into the community, into the rest of your life, to promote opportunities for girls and women as best you can? And if that means searching, if that means arguing for something that you believe in, if that means stepping out of your comfort zone to go to the president and say, this is unfair, that this is what is happening, whether it's at corporate business or a university or whatever. If you don't do that, we'll be talking about this 100 years from now, it'll be the same thing. Go Pioneers.